Peter and I met with right on Monday, so hopefully we can.
Let's call the meeting to order. It's March 21st at 1:05. And with us are Sandy Bob McCurry.
Here.
Lee Hall.
Here.
Sarah Melish. And Harrison.
Here.
Richard Smith.
Here.
Gar Morse.
Here.
Sue Philbrick.
Here.
And I'm Chris Onley, the chairman. And with us are three architects, John Harden, Chuck Wisner, and Gary Gilbert. And in fact, we're gonna start off with them, if that's okay with everybody, and they're gonna tell us about the design guidelines and where they came from and where we're going.
Okay, so what we want to do is just, you've all seen the guidelines, right? So we're just going to do a quick thing about behind the curtain. How do we think and how do we get there? So maybe a few pictures and some ideas about why we think the design guidelines are good for the town. So Gary's going to do that. And then John's going to just talk about some of the more detailed items that come up when you're doing these sorts of things. So that's our agenda, and then questions.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, that's good.
good. So Gary, you are on.
Sorry for the disorganization here. So I should share the screen.
Yes.
So we're here to talk about mushrooms.
Stop. It's not funny.
Oh my goodness. All right, so, well, before we go to the slideshow, we prepared a character statement for the town, which is about 3 paragraphs long, and it's pretty meaningful, we felt, because as we all know, the town's charming, but why is it charming? Well, it's got a lot of heterogeneous historic style buildings, which all tend to do some things very similarly, even though they're of different architectural styles. And those are the kind of things we want to encourage in new construction in the downtown area. Historic buildings, luckily, I guess, tend to have a base, middle, and a top to them. They have a lot of architectonic forms like bays, dormers, things like that to break up the massing of the building and make the buildings more of a human scale. The other thing that's going on downtown that it's not all, this is not all explicitly said in the character statement, but it's more or less comes out of it if you think about it, is that a lot of the buildings are not set back deeply from the street, which helps create a street wall and a sort of intimate scale to downtown, which is what's charming about it. We don't have a lot of what's called missing teeth. We don't have a lot of voids. In some areas, there's some voids, there's some far too wide open spaces over that way. But generally speaking, a lot of even the streets adjacent to downtown are closely knit. The buildings are fairly close to the street and create a street wall. And some of the buildings are surprisingly high and still work. Others are lower. So those are some of the essences of what's charming about our town. And in the design guidelines, we're tending to try to encourage similar, whether it's modern or historic styled, similar use of similar architectural elements to achieve the same results.
Can I
That's
just add something, Gary?
Yes.
So the scale of the street, the height of the buildings, the setbacks, all of that is what creates the townscape, which is, you know, sort of how we think about a village is like the townscape and the experience of moving through the town. So all those things are sort of critical to have, maintain the townscape we have and to enhance it.
So I won't go through, this is a shortened slideshow, about 9 slides or something. There's a couple of them worth making points of tonight. And then John's going to talk about the guts and the mechanism of the design guidelines themselves. This is a successful project, and it's kind of nice for a number of reasons, but the massing of the building is broken up. We could suffice it to say that. This is not so nice. It's a big extruded slab of a brick building that had no, what you call modulations, nothing that bumped in or out. So it was quite detrimental to the town, and I'm told that they added renovations and pulled out the entries and porches, which helped a bit, but not enough in a lot of people's opinion, mine too. Some of the buildings are single story and some of the retail stores, and some of them have housing above. That's a topic to talk about later. This is an interesting street corner here at Cargo. and I forgot, I don't know what you call the building, the Realtors building across the street. What they sort of lack, and I think it's kind of apparent, is this, it doesn't create enough of a street wall. It would, that intersection would probably be better with 2 or 3 story buildings there. A more greater sense of enclosure and intimacy. And then we get these anomaly buildings, which everyone seems to not particularly object to because they are anomalies, they're not the norm. And a town like ours can easily handle a few buildings here and there that are taller. And there's also the grade of the street is part of the reason why they grew this way. That brick portion was probably in a basement originally, but that's a 3.5 story building and it works fine. It's got a dormer that's set back from the edges of the building. The massing is, it could be broken up even more, but it's tolerable. There's a 4.5 story building. It's kind of surprising. It's kind of nice. It's got historical elements to it. It could be even better, but it's not terrible. This building's got, it's really surprising with 13 units in it. That's kind of shocking, actually. But it's got every kind of architectonic element you could think of, you know, recessed entries, roofs, the roofs are going in 2 different directions. You've got a shed roof dormer, you've got a window bay. There's a lot of things going on which help break down the scale of the building. And we all filled Chapel Street. Is that 3 or 4 units each of the buildings? Someone said 4 units.
Three.
3 for each, which is really surprising.
Third
because
building in the back with 2.
It's really surprising how handsome that is, and yet you've got multiple units in the building. And then I'd sort of end with this, I think, a success story that in the wording, the language of District D, just in one sentence, it allowed us to force a developer to give us, he was going to propose two buildings that had 90-foot long roofs on them. And through a number of back and forths in the ZBA, we were able to get him to break those up and actually make 2 different architectural styles to the 2 buildings. And they read as a cluster of 4 buildings. The neighbors have told me after these hearings and all, they feel it was a pretty successful project. And it was far from that at the beginning. So through language in our bylaws, and sometimes just a good sentence or 2, you can get an awful lot out of a developer. And then put this in for Chris. What we don't want to see, these are the kind of parking arrangements and driveway arrangements we really don't want to see at all. They create big, this is what you call missing teeth, a gigantic parking lot exposed to the sidewalk. We'd much rather have as a discrete driveways to the side with parking on the side or rear. Done. It's John's turn.
Thanks, Eric. So one of the ways that we started, and by the way, it's kind of tricky to ask 3 architects to put together a whole set of design guidelines, because we really don't like the design guidelines. We like just to design and do good work on our own. So this is an interesting challenge for us. But what we took as our beginning point was the context, right? Was our town. That is the model by which we can look at and try and find those common elements, as Gary mentioned, and also provide the town with a document that when folks on perhaps a design review board might be reviewing a project, they could look at it and point to it and have some guidance, right? So as Gary mentioned also, we wanted to preserve the essence of what we love about our town. And Manchester is a heterogeneous town. It's actually not a collection of a whole bunch of buildings that look the same, quite the opposite. It's a collection of lots of different buildings that look quite different. However, there's a certain level of quality or a sense of scale and proportion, all those little things that are pretty hard to describe that are at a very nice level in town. There are exceptions as we've seen, but we wanted to try and describe some of those things so that when folks come to town and have to start to think about how they design something, they have a place to start, and we all have something to reference and help make sure it becomes something that is fitting for the town. So how do we do that, and what's in the guidelines? It basically starts from a high level and then slowly gets more detailed. So it begins with thinking about context and talking about that a little bit. Quite often it references that projects should look to their context. And we use that loosely. It doesn't just mean the building next door, but but it could be the street, it could be another building in town, right? Because of that heterogeneous nature of our town, we think that's okay. We want people to be looking at lots of things in our town. And then we go to building massing, which talks about perhaps, number of stories and roof shapes, length of roof, length of ridge, dormers, but also orientation. Now, something that was interesting that came up in our meeting was one would assume that most projects should be orientated toward the main street. Well, if you take one walk up School Street, you see that that's not the case. There are lots of examples of houses that are actually turned typically towards the south. So the entry was facing south. Most of the main rooms face south. That's sort of an old New England way to build things. So it's not quite that simple, right? So we actually included something in there. It said something like project should be oriented towards the main street unless there's a very good reason not to do that. But in any case, it should have some very good thought behind it. So then we went on to talk about building facades and windows, orientation of windows. Something to note, I think, is in every case, we didn't want to dictate style or too much detail. Because if you over constrict something, we're going to end up with something like perhaps another town. Yes.
Yeah, and the variety that we get is what makes the townscape sort of interesting. You turn a corner and there's something new, or you turn a corner and the scale changes. And that's that pedestrian sort of surprise element.
Yep, exactly. But certain things are better than others. For example, windows should be vertically orientated, right? That's better than a horizontal window. So we've asked for that. We've asked that it have some Munson pattern or mullion pattern. Again, not dictating that it's 6/6, could be 2/1, could be 2/2, but just that something is included that responds in some way to the context, right? So it then keeps on going into a bit more detail about perhaps some elements of design like brackets on a building or posts or pilasters. Those are architectural elements that aren't necessarily part of every project, but they make the difference. They're probably part of most projects that we see walking around town. And when it's appropriate, we would like to see elements like that included in projects. Those are the highlights, I think.
Someone asked you a question.
Yeah.
You told me that I thought was a great question.
Yeah.
How do we avoid the ugly?
Yeah.
Well, half of these design guidelines are mandated dimensional things. Like we're not going to allow a 7-story building in town, 9-story building. We're pretty convinced the MBTA is going to allow us to do that. So we think a 3.5-story building represents a 3-story building with a pitched roof. That's what the half-story tends to produce. So downtown could benefit from slightly taller buildings, 3.5 stories, not 2.5, like you have in the residential low density neighborhoods of town. It would actually help the downtown and create more intimate scale in the downtown. So you avoid the ugly by certain dimensional parameters that are must-dos, and then people have to go through a design review for all the other things, which we can expand on before this document's finished, but we got to start on.
Questions?
To what extent do you dictate materials?
Good question. So again, we point towards the context. There are certainly prevalent materials in town, which we describe, such as clapboards, shingles, there's some brick, there's some stucco. So we ask for similar materials in terms of texture, right? Doesn't mean that they have to be cedar clapboards or even cedar shingles, right? But that in texture and scale, they might have that appearance. So there are some excellent products today that are simply more durable. They, to the general public, would look exactly the same as the very expensive cedar, would last a lot longer, actually. And we think that that's appropriate.
You work in this all the time, so I'm sure you're aware that there's some
regulations on what you can require in terms of materials. Sounds as if you've covered it by saying, if it looks like,
Yeah,
Yes.
we avoid things like hardy board and other cementitious materials. We don't want to name those products, right? But we can say there are products there that could be acceptable.
Yeah, some towns get so specific. I don't think we want to go that way, but some towns would say, well, it's got to be a slate roof or synthetic slate. I don't think we want to go in that direction, but something not just scale wise, but dimensionally that's similar to historic structures. So corner boards in the building, 10 or 12 inches wide is a really good thing. Whether it's made out of plastic wood or not, you're probably better off with plastic wood. Probably all are, because we won't have so much peeling paint and the thing will last a long time and not rot.
Yeah,
Et cetera, et cetera.
and the other way that we can have some level of control is we've asked that when a project is coming, that they actually present to the planning board or to us a storyboard of materials.
Exactly.
Like what are the materials? How do they fit together? What are the colors? Because that's really helpful for people to see the live material.
So, can I, go ahead, sorry. I was gonna ask if you could comment on the suggestions you made for the administration of the guidelines, of the organization that would be used to review.
So we had suggested in the guidelines or in our work that there would be a design review board. The purpose of that would be to have a group of people who understood the guidelines well, who have a basic knowledge in architecture or design, so that they could review a project and comment upon it. Most likely be able to write a letter of support. Or let's say a project comes before them that's not so great. It would give an opportunity to improve that project until it gains support. And then we write that letter to the planning board or whoever for recommending that project move forward. At least that was something that we talked about.
So there seem like maybe, in my view, there are two constituencies that are going to be looking at this. One is yourselves. If suppose a developer hires Chuck and says, I got this lot downtown. I want you to design a 4-unit building to fit in there. As an architect, would you think that these design guidelines are sort of architect friendly or opaque or not quite sure how they
I
work?
think they're really reasonable. As I said before, I think it's a good example. I don't think this town I think the town would support the approach that we're taking where we want dimensional similarity, scale elements. But we don't want to go so far as to say they have to be slate roofs, for example. I think that's going right down the middle of the road compared to other towns' design guidelines. But we are asking for a review of their project, right down to the trim boards. And then we'll pass our recommendations on to the planning board who's going to be approved.
So you don't think these guidelines would be off-putting to an architect?
I think of them as reasonable constraints.
Okay.
And sometimes an architect's constraints are a good thing,
Yeah.
versus a blank slate.
Right.
Right, you do anything crazy. So reasonable constraints to
And what
serve the town.
What about an architect who's creative?
Have at it inside the guidelines.
No, that's a great question,
Yeah.
because we talked a lot about that, because there are examples in town of modern buildings, right, that don't look like some of the buildings in the village. Could you take our guidelines and design something that is modern?
I think
Actually,
you could.
I think we could.
We
Probably
could,
good.
yeah.
Okay, the second constituency, which is, in my view, much more important, are the people who are going to be voting for this thing.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to understand it and have confidence? Some of these people are very worried that this law is going to mess up our town. We don't want to mess up the town.
Right.
How-
Oh, go ahead.
So I guess my question is, how do you think these guidelines will assure or calm those very, very anxious people in any way? Maybe it's impossible to.
Well, I think there's some population that probably might be impossible, but I think our whole intent here was to describe the character of the town, what's really lovely about it, why does the townscape here work? And then maybe through pictures and drawings, do like say, here's why these are important and have examples. And I think we have to tell a good story.
It was my understanding that this is only gonna apply to the MBTA zoning overlay district. So
Right.
if somebody didn't like the design guidelines, they can go into the existing zoning
Okay,
and do their own thing, just like they can today.
okay.
So I think the intent
Even if
was,
they're doing more units,
well, they wouldn't be able to do the more
Okay,
units,
yeah,
but
okay,
if they want to not be restricted at all in design, then they go under existing zoning.
That's a really important point. It takes away nothing from existing owners.
Right.
It takes away nothing.
Right.
And I would like to add to something Gar said, because I think there's another constituency, and that's the developer. Because wouldn't you agree that the guidelines give the architect something to go back to the developer with? Because in many cases, some of the things that we want to see might cost a little. That's the nature of things. And so I think we can maybe encourage that.
Can I ask a question? What level of detail do you expect to see? Are you looking at schematics? You're not looking at,
Design development,
huh?
design development phase.
Okay, so not
You wanna-
final working
You
drawing.
want to see materials and.
At least design development.
Yeah, we would expect to see people at the very beginning of their process as they're going through approvals, right? Most people get to schematic design, early design development, but usually not much further because it's a big risk
Oh, shit. Yeah.
to draw all those drawings without a sense of if it's going to be approved.
The other thing is to keep in mind is, we're not inventing this process. It's not like, oh, a lot of towns have design review boards. A lot of towns have design guidelines. And a lot of towns have a long history with them, and there's a lot of history to draw from. If anything, this is gonna calm people down. This part of what you guys are doing, if the districts you draw, that's gonna draw a lot of comment. But this is like a security blanket, and it's all for the good, because I think even the anti-growth people and pro-growth people would all agree. Some of these charming elements have served us well, and that's what we're all trying to see in the
My
future.
concern was simply that somebody's gonna show up with a mortarboard, wood and, this, that, and that's nothing more.
Ah.
I mean, I think you gotta have it designed developed.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to address the scale issues
Right.
and the different pieces that we have in there without drawings.
Yeah, most towns list what is required to be submitted, and it's usually 1/8" elevations. Sometimes they ask for them to be rendered. There's always a site plan. Sometimes they ask for a landscape plan. So we could ask for all of that.
I mean, I think that would be sensible. So you know what you're gonna
You
get.
have to ask for that. They're gonna have to know if they have bays sticking out or not, dormers sticking out or
But
not.
unless
They're gonna have to have
we
the
tell
design.
them at the outset,
That's right.
Right, we could add that to where we talk about the design board, the materials board, we could add that in, that here are the minimum requirements.
yeah, no, I think that would make your job a hell of a lot easier.
Oh, and also we've asked for a narrative.
Okay,
So something that they could describe what the thinking is behind what they've designed. So with that, drawings, material board.
have you read the narrative on the 40B?
No,
It's
there's,
not worth very much.
but it's easy to comply with this, really. But if you're designing a reasonable building, it's not hard. This isn't rocket science.
Well, that goes to the fourth constituency. And that is the authorities who are going to be reviewed. Whether or not these are acceptable or not to the state. And they've made very clear that they have to be clear and easy to understand and check off the boxes. So to think that,
So we loosely modeled it after a town that already submitted to the state, right? West Newbury. And theirs are more elaborate than I think we're heading in the direction of, and ours sort of echo theirs. And there's no big surprises in what we're asking to review here. right? And nobody really knows yet because West Newbury hasn't gotten a response, but it's only logical to my mind anyhow, that they're gonna, things like this, they would approve. You know, you're allowed to have some cutoffs. You can't be taller than X, you can't be longer than Y. You are allowed to say that, and design guidelines are reasonable.
I think the premise that we're starting from looking at our own town and the context is an excellent place to start because it's reasonable. I can't think of a more reasonable way to describe how we would come up with these guidelines. It's very defensible, logical, and because of the heterogeneous nature of the town, it's not limited, it's actually the opposite. So we hope it will be received pretty well.
John, I think the materials section was left to be done on that document, and maybe it would be a good idea to just get a quick recap, then we can add it to that document when you take it to the planning board. Sure.
Did we get a budget to get some graphics?
No, the planning board can't even get a budget. To get some graphic.
No,
Oh, no.
I know Greg has a slush fund, but I mean, we should meet, this group, as far as I see it, we should meet again and really look through what pictures and graphics. Pictures, the way I see it, pictures are used because they're cheap and quick and you just snap them and they're in there. Graphics might be a bit better because some of them are really cute and they get to a point. So we should figure out what points we really want graphics for. And as I said, many towns have done this and some have lots of pictures and drawings and some have fewer, but we need some graphics, we need the right graphics.
I think we don't want to spend money on graphics until we even know if it's going to go into existence.
That's a good point. So we could get some of them, but we should at least know one.
Renderings of what it might be.
Little box drawings showing where a dormer sticks out or what we mean by certain points. So we should figure out what the document should have as a minimum, and we could probably get that together for the submission. And then if there's more we want to see, if we have a list, we can give it to you and say ultimately, and you might be able to call some of the consultants other towns have used and just simply ask for permission to use their graphics. You know,
Or we could pull some from books.
Well, some of those towns have taken stuff from our town and put it into theirs. I
If they-
believe
Pictures,
there's,
yes.
If they have submitted them to the state, then those are public. And we're entitled to get them.
I'm not sure.
We're entitled to see them. I'm not sure that we're entitled to use them.
Yeah,
Well, we could contact their consultant, ask their permission, put their name on there, maybe we'll be able to use it if we cite them, just like a photograph, so. But we should figure that out, and
yeah.
it doesn't have to be part of the final, the
Right.
text is the next thing to work on, right?
Yeah, and I think what we'll want to coordinate or collaborate with you all, what role can we play in presenting to the town or the planning board to tell the story, to tell our story? Because that's why we need those graphics, to tell a good story, to support the. And I know that's down the road, but we can
We're not there yet.
figure that out.
And we did, just for full disclosure, in the document that we prepared, we did use some images from a book, which is I always forget the name of the book.
It's a nice book you had.
It's a simple title.
Do Your House Right or something like that. So
Do it good.
Get your house right
Get Your House Right.
and the concise townscape.
Yes, right.
So the town planners, Fred, there's some stuff from Cape Cod that's really elaborate. Have you seen that document? Sam? Big for that.
Okay.
which one?
He's not here.
It was from,
He's on.
can't remember what town it was.
Oh, one of the design guidelines from
From
Cape
the,
Cod.
from the
Yeah.
Cape,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
I did see it.
Those were
Yeah.
top, but
So the bottom line is that the drawings that are in there now would need to be worked.
Yes.
License issues may exist.
Or we have to give credit to the book, which, you know, it might be a thing where we lend the book to people who are coming to town. Not lend, we might give them a copy or something. As long as we give credit to that book, it's an excellent book. It would be, if projects were done as that book asked, we'd be very happy in town.
Or we might borrow your concise townscape.
Right.
I got it from the library, but I had to give it back.
I still got
I have a copy also.
I think that the legal
I can't
language,
Find my
has-
books, so they're very.
somebody needs to schematically at least work out the legal language. That's what we started to go in that direction because because ultimately you guys have to create a written document, right? So we started writing in that direction. The words we worked on earlier, a few meetings ago, were just to establish the basic foundation of what we're trying to do, but somebody needs to work through that. And is that going to be the town planner or
Yeah.
consultant?
The consultant.
Consultant?
Combination of consultant.
So I'm really anxious to see how they set it up.
So are we.
We all.
Well, you guys are just drawing the
One
district,
step
right?
at a time.
So, part of our job is to explain this to people. So are you guys gonna be available to do some explaining?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're willing to tell our story
Yeah.
anyway, with pictures and some words. Yeah.
What do you charge?
The same thing you charge.
Yeah.
There you go.
A very high nothing.
That was the, well, we.
I don't know if this is the place to chat about this. It may not be, so you guys can tell us, but one thing that came up at the end of our last meeting, these guidelines seem perfectly appropriate for downtown area.
Yes.
The question came up, hey,
Yeah.
what about the LCD? There's a whole level of thinking about the LCD area, which is a little bit beyond our purview, to be honest. We'd be more than happy to opine on it, but context is different, or there's basically none, right?
Right.
There's
Blank slate.
the lot sizes are different. There are no roads really, right? It's sort of a blank slate. So,
I see it as part of our process. I don't see it as beyond our purview, but it has to be done.
What is your opinion about the LCD? You think we'd be curious to hear what you think? You know, I think there are
Who wants to
different.
go first?
No, I think you asked a conversation stopper, as I recall, which
Yes.
was, and what would you like to see?
exactly.
There was silence.
I mean, we have opinions. They're all probably different. You all probably have opinions.
We may have some information.
Sure.
Which is, I think we're no longer thinking about a 20-acre area. I think we're thinking about something that's closer to 6.
6 to 10 at the most, yeah.
I did see something recently where it was mostly the storage
Yes,
property
yes,
and not the,
not the doctor's offices, not the MAC.
so that's very different, right?
Why not the doctor's office?
Because
It's a bigger site.
it's
We
a
don't
bigger
want that
site, we
big a
don't
site.
need that much space.
We have to go based on
All right,
the lot.
I'll just throw out there, because this just seems incredibly logical in my mind, is that we could address that area of town with two types of development in mind. One, to allow to be very light touch and allow potentially real anomalies to be built there, large buildings with multifamily housing structures or we could encourage the subdivision of the property. That doesn't necessarily require a subdivision, but we could encourage smaller clusters of semi-attached or detached buildings to create a neighborhood. And personally, I'd like our town not to turn our back to that part of town. I'd like our town to welcome it and want it to become part of the town. And therefore, to me, if there's residences there, they should be part of a neighborhood. There should be pedestrian paths, open spaces they can use. Perhaps the buildings should be clustered, but smaller massing, we can encourage a whole slew of things if we go in that direction. So those are two basic
Right.
paradigms, I guess.
So as a counterpoint to the small village thing, I could imagine of any place in town that area could actually withstand some sizable buildings. And even a place, I always say this, but I think it's true, where if there's a young couple who just married and need an apartment, that's where they might live, in an apartment building, something that's more multifamily size. Or if there's seniors in town who are looking to downsize and move to a senior housing type of building, again, that would be perhaps an appropriate place to do it. It's even more so perhaps if it's smaller, over 20 acres, you can imagine lots of different ways to do it. In a smaller 6 acre, it's much more concise.
I think the Summer Street residences are an interesting analog for that, because there you have attached townhomes which do not achieve the density that we need. But because they're combined with an apartment building that provides less expensive and more compact apartments, the overall property does. And there you're looking at a property which is only a few acres. So something like that could exist on a 5-6 acre plot.
Yeah, I think whichever direction it goes, large buildings, village, smaller scale. What we do want to do is take the character of the town and the pedestrian friendliness. And all you have to do is look at Seaport or look at Kendall Square in Cambridge, where they miss so many, it's just big buildings and canyons and no pedestrian friendliness, no cafes on the street, no, so those are the mistakes you don't want to make.
There's another big layer to this. It seems to me anyhow, this is the biggest opportunity in town to get that 20% affordable housing number, which gets us ahead of the game, satisfying the state's goals. And it's also an opportunity where we could encourage smaller units, which starts to address a topic that's never talked about, the missing middle, which is truly affordable, or housing that's in between, high-end condos and
Section 8.
and Section 8. There's by encouraging smaller units to be built, it's the only way you can get the market to give you reasonably priced housing. So there's an opportunity. It's the only other place in town where that opportunity exists.
I'm worried about that,
Passing.
Hmm?
Passing.
passing the
Yeah,
review,
yeah.
because they very specifically state that you can't,
It's for families.
it's for families and you cannot say this area is only for 1 and 2 bedrooms.
But you can build incentives into the whole thing of 3.5 stories versus 4.5 stories. We'll give you the 4.5 if you give us this.
Right.
That's an option that's always been on the table.
But I wonder how the state defines families.
They're assuming that each unit is 1,000 square feet. That's family friendly. And that's the calculations they're using.
Okay, that's not just.
Well,
you address that.
two bedroom.
Two bedroom.
A 2-bedroom, that's not
So
unreasonable.
you address it, but then you provide incentives if you can work it in.
That's just
Yeah,
what's
I
in their
think the
policy.
issue is that you can't make a requirement
Right.
that it be just 1 bedroom or seniors or.
Right. Sure, but it also doesn't
Doesn't
doesn't preclude.
Right, right.
Mark?
Can you?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if we allow the right kind of density at that storage place, you could get the kind of the standard 40B 4-story buildings, but those are elevated buildings, which means they're handicap accessible. They'll have to have accessible units. You can require the 20% affordable. You'll be able to kind of check a number of boxes. And given the fact that, it's kind of at the end of that road, it's not very visible, having those types of buildings there kind of isn't visually obtrusive. It's also right adjacent to, conservation land, so it's a desirable location to build those and to live. So I think if we zoned it for the right density, that you would just see that without having to have other requirements.
But you'd have incentives, Mark, right? You'd have to build incentives into.
Well, I mean, if the density is there, the financial incentive is enough for a developer to, if he can get enough units, whether they're rental or for sale, will kind of dictate what happens there.
Let me just add what would be the most attractive thing to a developer would be some easing of the parking requirement in that area for any building, for any multifamily building. If 1 car per unit were allowed, that would make any project much more feasible
And attractive.
and attractive. It's less big parking lots, less parking structures, just parking that very often honestly can be achieved in the footprint of the building. Things like that.
And clustering, we didn't mention that. It'd be really nice, whatever's done, to cluster it and keep as much open space,
Yeah.
which everybody adores. It's easy to
But
achieve.
those parcels are currently pretty ugly.
I mean, yeah, part of it's conservation is restricted anyway. A small part of the property is wetlands.
Is wetlands, but
Yeah.
So what would you contemplate? 4 stories on a pedestal, parking underneath?
Max.
How high would that be?
It ends up being 5 stories, depending on.
50 feet, 50 something.
The height restriction out there is 55. Just,
And that's buildable in wood, so it's still the first floor would have to be a podium. But up above, so that's a very reasonable, it's a good model. Yeah,
It's been used around a bit. And it's very, very popular and it's economically reasonable.
But you could also achieve the density with 2.5, 3.5 clusters of 2.5 and 3.5 story buildings, more in the neighborhood direction rather than smaller, slightly smaller scale. So there's a couple ways to go.
I guess it would be clever to figure out the zoning of it to allow for either option.
So I mean, in essence, you're talking about one freestanding building, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So that goes to tough on your neighbors,
Well,
or tough on the neighborhood.
I think we're saying you could approach it two different basic ways. One as a village where downtown is sort of the model. Or one where it's a more dense, less building, maybe 1 or 2 buildings.
Right.
With design restrictions. Yeah.
You could do a taller building and it could be broken up massing wise in a lot of ways, so it reads more intimately, or you could have detached or semi-attached structures, also clusters of them, because this density requirement is not that huge, 15 an acre.
Yeah.
It's not that gigantic.
No.
So you still could have there's different approaches to it. I think we should consider them and see where they lead us before we make a decision.
We're trying to balance. Thinking about town meeting, we want to have as few units
it's possible.
new that can be built.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that's butting up against this problem.
So I guess John and I are in different directions. I'm steering away from the 40B kind of building and more towards a neighborhood, clustered buildings. They can be attached.
No, but I think you weren't at the last meeting. But we would be willing to just do some sketches to say what would different scenarios look like on paper.
Oh, boy, that would be great.
That would be helpful, I think.
Because I think certainly in
Hugely
town,
helpful.
one of the areas of interest is senior housing.
Yeah.
And that by definition, you need a building with an elevator.
Especially if it's assisted living.
Well, there are
Yeah.
examples, actually to Gary's point, there's a place called Boulders in Wenham, which is
Yeah.
Hamilton.
Well,
Wenham, thank you. That is senior living, senior housing duplexes, but it's designed for, I don't know if it's restricted.
it is.
It is
It's age
restricted,
restricted,
so-
55.
Yeah, it's not a lot. It's probably 24 or so units there.
Does that satisfy the state senior housing?
Sure,
Peter
Yeah.
Crabtree,
you can't
who,
require
You
it,
can't require it.
but it can.
you can't require it.
But it
you can
counts.
allow it.
Peter Crabtree, who sadly passed away and worked with us on the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, he did a lot of friendly 40Bs throughout the state. And he gave me a number of PDFs of different projects he worked on or liked. And there are some that are larger structures, but are just beautiful, they create an environment. So there's some examples.
Yeah, and an example was mentioned in our last meeting, Maple Woods, which is also in Wenham, actually.
Yeah.
Which is senior housing. It's 2 or 3 stories, but it's back in the woods. There's a large parking lot in front of it, but it's attractive.
Large park, did you say that?
There's a parking lot in front of it.
I mean, assisted living generally.
Gotta go
has
somewhere.
Less requirements
Is-
for parking.
Right, yeah.
I think the visuals be a huge help.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, so to the parking point though.
Sketches.
well, if you've got PDFs of examples,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a terrific thing.
To the point about parking, if 2 spaces per unit are required, any project that is sizable is gonna have a huge parking component. And it's not, it doesn't look great. Environmentally, it's not great. It's a lot of impervious surface. So there are benefits besides being more feasible for a developer to actually do them.
You gotta have people willing to live there.
Sure.
And if the town wants to get beyond the 10% required affordable housing, we have to do something to try to build in incentives to get a bigger percentage. So all of us can breathe a sigh of relief for a couple decades or something,
At least a couple years.
at least a couple of years.
At least one.
It's a
day.
reasonable goal. If it's done thoughtfully, we can get there.
Okay, any more questions? Is there anyone from the public like to ask a question? This might be a good time.
Any raised hands?
Mark, or anything?
I guess you guys did an outstanding job.
You certainly
Thank you.
did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you,
We'll
Richard.
send the
Thank you,
check
Richard,
right
too,
along.
for.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the work you guys did.
That's- oh
It's
my
really
God,
a gift to the
it's
town.
terrific.
Yeah, it's good. We didn't play too much.
Well, yeah, you kept it hidden.
We did it well.
We never had the brown line.
No, we didn't. Maybe tonight.
Tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
you.
Very helpful.
It's a lot of work and a lot of thought that went into that, and skills that
I'll just join the.
maybe are available elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Look, now you guys have the hard job.
Yeah. None of this feels.
Now I'm gonna see where your district is gonna be.
Well, let's take a round.
Oh, that's what's next.
You know, well, we're gonna talk about our meeting with the planning board on Monday. We're gonna be presenting the districts.
But not this.
We may mention this, but,
If you need us, let us know.
okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
much,
Thank you.
very much.
Okay, well, we're doing well on time, that's great. So, Monday, we have the meeting with the planning board. And, I would like to put something on the table for you to think about. Because I met with Ron, the chair, about it. And what I proposed to him was that, each member of the task force make a 2-minute presentation, or maybe less, about what their experience on the task force and what their concerns and hopes are for how this comes together. So I want to know if people would be okay with that kind of a thing.
I worry that some of that would be repetitive. Unless and I don't know how we would avoid that.
Would it be bad if it's repetitive?
We're all in unison. Speak.
What,
With 7 of us, it's gonna get pretty boring.
I don't think I'll be in unison.
Yeah,
I am not happy at 30 acres. So, I mean, I understand the reasons for it, but I'm not happy with the 30 acres downtown.
so what, don't mean to cut you off, Richard.
That's okay.
But what are you thinking of? Is it that kind of thing? I'm not happy with a specific,
so I think, sort of, I came to this task force meeting from the historic commission or wherever we came from. And, this is a challenge that, we don't really want to face, but we have to. And we're doing the best we can with it, and my particular concerns are that, 30 acres is too much, or that we don't have enough control over future development, or quite the opposite, that, this is something the town needs, and we should, be doing this anyway. I don't, who knows?
I would welcome it, and I think everybody here would be positive. I mean, for example, I could say, I don't like the 30 acres, but I think that's the best 30 acres in town we could pick. And so I'm, if I were sitting on the planning board, I think I would really welcome it. Because it would give me a sense of the depth of thought that had gone into it. And of the fact that there is some complexity to the decisions that we've made.
Sounds like we may have talked about this before the meeting, which is not the case. Yeah,
But it
no,
also gives the planning board a sense that they're really people with different points of view coming at it. So in
Yeah,
a sense, we are representative of the town.
I would offer a different view. I think every one of us getting up, it will get repetitive. Why can't we simply say this, here are the consensus judgments that we've made and where we're coming from, and have one person present it? I mean, I think, yes, we have some differences, but I think the common goals are the same. I haven't sensed anybody who's coming from a position other than we're trying to minimize the damage that we have to incur to comply with this law. We've been charged with the responsibility by the select board to come up with something that complies with 48 to our best ability. Not, you know, I don't think anybody likes it, but our goal is simply to minimize the damage. And I don't think it's too much more complicated. We can say we've had disagreements, but on balance, here are the things that we think make sense. And we can talk about, you know, why we picked the sites that we picked. And maybe some of the sites we didn't pick for and maybe articulate the reasons. I think that's much more on point. I don't think the planning board cares whether I don't like one site, because it doesn't matter. These are the recommendations we've made. We can say we've had some disagreement, but on balance, we're all on the same page. And I just think, you know, going around, it's like, you know, I don't know, I'm too cynical. Nobody wants to
It's like
hear you,
grade school.
nobody wants to hear your personal story, okay?
I'm interested in your personal story.
Come on, blurt it out. Let your personal story.
Denny's got a point.
Yeah, I'm
And-
I
sort of
agree.
Yeah.
on Denny's page,
Okay.
although
Yeah.
I think Richard's point is important too, you know, so if there's a way we can list our concerns along with our consensus points.
I think there may also be some we should talk a little bit about the evolution of our thoughts. I certainly came in here assuming that 40 Beach Street was the right place, and we'd have retail on the bottom and 2.5 stories of residential above. And it wouldn't there wouldn't be any more parking lot than there is now, and that would be great. And I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole anymore.
Right. And I came in thinking we should be outside the downtown district and into the other residential districts with larger lots, and had to come around to the thinking that that was not a good idea.
Well, my attitude has been, to some extent, and I hope we're successful at it, we're trying to frustrate this law. We're trying to keep from following the law and I don't think we're being, you know, deceitful about it or anything. It is what it is. But, you know, we're not doing really what the law explicitly says we're supposed to do.
We're doing what it explicitly says, but we're not doing what it was intended to do.
Maybe not implicitly.
We're deliberately
Yeah,
steering away from the stated goal of the law.
Sure.
Right.
Right.
so, and that's okay. I mean,
That's
I,
their fault for creating.
And we're not alone.
No,
No,
We're not alone.
no, we're not.
right.
I mean, I think that is a part of
Doing
it.
everything we can to make it not very enticing to developers.
yeah,
Maybe the answer is to have a general statement and then have
a chance for
a couple
people.
of people
yeah.
get up and say, just as an example, let me tell you why
Yeah.
I was in favor of this and where we've evolved. So I really don't think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people get up and tell why they did it. I think it will get repetitive and I think it'll get diluted, the message.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the most important thing is to focus on the conclusion.
Right, I mean,
And
This,
but my,
this is
my,
what we're recommending.
but my experience with the planning board is, God knows what's gonna happen. That's the truth.
That is true.
Mark has his hand raised.
Oh, Mark,
Yeah, I mean, so as I've said all along, I think we need to come in with this is our proposal. We've reached consensus, and this is why. But I think it's useful for the board to understand that either A, where some people started and why they have agreed to where we are, or what their concerns are with what we have, even though they have voted to support it. But it's like Richard said, it's the best 30 acres that you could come up with. So, I mean, I think it's important that the board hears those views, but understands that there is a single recommendation from the board, from this committee.
I advocated a unified approach to the planning board myself, but what I'm puzzled about and can't figure out is how we convey to them that some of the advantages that we can give them in thinking about our path. Because they're gonna take this and go wherever they go. And it would seem to me that anything we can give them to show how we evolved our decisions might help them in making their ultimate conclusion.
Well, are we kind of asking them saying, give us some guidance
No.
about where we should go next? Or are we just saying, this is it?
It's our recommendation.
don't you think that'll come up in a question? Don't you think there'll be a lot of questions
I
about
think
how we got there?
Yeah, and there's a bit of a the
I-
whack-a-mole problem.
I think
Yeah, you
that,
might be right.
I think
Yeah.
we need to explain why we selected the districts we did.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I perceive, in my experience, the planning board views this as their decision.
Sure. it
We are
is.
very helpful and they may well just say, thank you very much, you're dismissed.
Right.
We'll take it from here.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, is that a likely outcome?
who knows? I don't know. So
You do have another project that you're taking, that's going to take some time.
well, there are a whole lot of projects. Yes, that's true.
In terms of the ordinances,
Yes.
the language.
Cell
Oh, well,
So
right.
she's talking about the cell signaling
Yeah.
special permit process. So I had a statement I could read you and see what you think, that this makes sense. So, in selecting potential districts, we've relied on a set of guiding principles. The most basic of these is our commitment to minimizing the impact of new zoning on the town. The importance of small scale and variety of architectural style is the key to preserving town character. A major part of this goal of minimizing the number of new incremental, is also minimizing the number of new incremental residential units. We can do this by limiting new zoning districts to areas in town that are already densely settled with residential units, and to areas that have small lots which can only support a small number of units. It's hard to do this while meeting all the rules and while trying to address some of the basic town needs. So we basically zeroed in on parts of town that would have the least amount of
Change.
I would
change.
add that we also attempted to include some of the newer build multifamily condominium developments,
Oh, sure.
which would be, we feel a developer would be less likely to come in and redevelop because they're too valuable and they wouldn't have much
Mhm.
financial gain.
So you might
You don't,
name a
it doesn't
couple of
need to be
those.
that wordy, but,
Yeah, clean it up.
you know, the
Like
21
21
Pine
Pine.
Street, Sawmill Circle,
Mhm.
Brook Street condos,
Yeah.
10-12 Summer Street.
Okay,
There's also an issue about the rate of change. I mean, it's basically saying we're putting we're suggesting these because there are already multifamily units, that being Summer Street being the prime example. But also so that, you know, where it's infill and change will happen more as it has happened here in the past.
This is
Slows
not,
things
we're
down.
not letting loose with one 20-acre
Right.
undeveloped property
Right.
that would be, could turn into a
300.
single.
I have a little
Right.
problem with the phrase impact, because I'm not exactly sure what that means. I think I know what you're getting at, but im- my focus from the beginning was on retaining the character of the town, and in particular, avoiding demolition, because we have no control ultimately over, we have only limited control over whatever replaces it. So, and I think that has been a concern.
So minimizing change, is that okay? Is that?
I would say minimizing demolition. Or retaining historical
Existing-
properties, or retaining the historical
Exist-
character or
And
something.
retaining existing buildings, I mean, to
Well,
some
I think we
extent.
need to state that we purposely excluded buildings in the historic district.
Yeah,
As an example.
yeah.
Chris, you had something about basic town needs or meeting town needs. Can you just read that part again?
Yeah, oh, it's hard to do this while meeting all the rules of the law and trying to address some basic town needs.
So what are the
Yeah.
basic town needs?
So we need senior housing, for example.
We're not addressing that.
But you can't.
So I,
No, we can't, no, that's
so
why
I
it's
think
hard.
I would take that
I
out.
would-
In
I
fact,
would
we're
move that
deliberately,
clause.
if you think that new housing is town needs, we're deliberately avoiding it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
And if we think that we need to improve our SHI, we're killing it.
Right.
Our SHI.
Sorry.
state housing inventory.
State housing inventory.
Subsidized housing.
So I'm sorry.
Subsidized housing
No,
inventory.
yeah,
Yeah,
subsidized housing
subsidized
inventory.
How are
Um,
we killing it?
Because
Ah,
we're adding
because-
units.
Because we, even if we can get permission to require that 20% of the units, we're trying to target 3 and 4 unit buildings.
Oh, so by killing it, you mean we're not.
Making it harder.
We're making it much, much worse.
Yes, I agree.
More difficult.
I agree. That was the argument for a larger I mean, there are arguments against the larger developments out in the LCD, but the big arguments are obviously,
Yeah, the 20% there would help
Yeah.
us a lot,
Yeah.
but,
no, that's a good point.
but the design that the place that we're most understand.
So we're deliberately not meeting town needs. You can just change it.
The only thing we could do is allow an extra unit for an approved 3 families. And that would be the equivalent of 20%.
Are we doing
Wait,
that?
say that again?
If we allowed an additional unit on the 3-family, multifamily building that were affordable.
So you allowed it to be 4-family instead
So
of
it'd be
3.
4 families, instead of
Yeah,
making it 20.
Yeah.
That would be,
That would mean relaxing that would mean pushing the first of all, you're not gonna get credit for that 4th unit on the density.
Right.
So that means you're pushing the density up even above the 15 and getting no credit for it.
No, don't we get credit for it?
Well, because they're not gonna give you credit for density when you're not,
Oh, maybe it won't count towards the capacity.
Right.
Right.
but would,
So you're gonna
incentive
get-
doesn't mean anything.
We
You're
get
gonna
credit
get
on the
more new
SHI.
units than what you expected.
We get credit on the SHI.
But we do get credit on this.
Yes, HI.
Yeah, but
Well,
If
that's
it's-
the balancing act.
I mean, the idea of pushing what is already a 15 dwelling unit per acre up to 20 so that we can have an incentive sure sounds unappealing to me.
Okay.
I
Second,
think we're at a point where we don't know what we all believe yet on the subject of density and
Right.
SHI.
And we're always going to be at the point where we don't know exactly what's going to happen after we zone it. We take a risk with every
Of
district.
course,
that we
that's,
zone.
Mhm.
That's the case no matter what. It's the
Yeah.
case now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we're not so much, because what we see now is, at least we have the experience of the last few decades to know what's going to happen in existing areas. But this, even in areas that are already dense, even in the general district, this zoning change is a big change. It's going to be a big change.
I'm sorry.
Well, you haven't looked at the heat map if you say that.
I'm
Sarah, because there's
sorry.
plenty of places.
We've had 3 units by right in existing structures with the requisite parking for over 50 years.
And it-
How
And
many?
it hasn't happened.
This is
I'm
the
sorry, that's a big exaggeration.
This is
But we
This
have
is a
the-
discussion we have had at every single.
Yeah,
meeting.
there's always a little footnote there.
Yes, so
so this, brings me to the, is it RKG? Is that their
Yeah.
name?
Yeah.
Okay, so at this thing that Sandy and I endured all day Saturday, it was helpful, but Eric from RKG spoke during the MBTA training. And he showed these analyses that he compiles, one being propensity for change modeling. Is this part of our scope of work? If it isn't part of our scope of work, I think we want it to be part of our scope
I
of
agree.
work. Because it's a very powerful tool, and it's, you know me, just the facts. It's just the facts. It's, he gets data from the assessors on the current property values. He goes to each of the entities like DPW and police and fire, and okay, what's your trigger for change where you need a new fire truck? How many more I mean, and same with the school, and it's all very understandable. So I just bring that up, and then also the fiscal impact analysis and the economic feasibility analysis. I don't remember what specifically is in our contract, but if we could just review that before Monday. None of it is?
No, the economic feasibility is, I believe. I think that's what the
I
15K
thought we
is
were
for.
having RKG study whether moving subsidized from 10 to 20% was going to have a large impact on the viability.
no, actually,
Of-
the study, Carl, was to see if it was economically feasible to require 20%.
Well,
Right.
okay,
Yes.
kind of same.
Because we have.
Guys at the state.
Yeah,
So that's
Right.
the only economic feasibility
So far.
analysis that
But
we've
in the
requested.
original
The first two
contract,
things you
Well,
mentioned.
we should, we'll go look at the contract.
because we had RKG in there, what were they supposed to do? They were part of the original contract.
They're doing something, so I should go back and look at the
Yeah.
contract.
My recollection is they were doing nothing.
This is the
Yeah.
Well,
proposal.
they were in the contract.
They were in the
I
contract
never
as a
saw the
potential add-on.
contract, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we'll look and see.
Yeah,
They submitted a separate proposal on February 8th,
Mhm.
and that appears to be what you were just saying, which is
20%.
the 20%,
But I'm
justifying the
talking-
20%.
I'm talking back at the beginning, RKG was included in the contract, and what
Right.
are they
They were.
expected to do?
Right.
Well, we should find out what the,
And I think the planning board, me included on the planning board,
Yeah.
would like a refresher on that.
well, and I think this propensity of change thing would be great to get.
It
I think
really
so,
would.
too, yeah.
Yes,
I would point out that we are also going to need consulting work to get those design guidelines turned into something that are formal design guidelines.
Excuse-
I think that's part
Where's
of,
the money?
Yes, where is the money coming from?
I don't know.
well, there's a.
Budget closes tonight.
There's a 50K
The
pot.
budget doesn't.
Have we exhausted the 50K
No,
pot from the
we haven't.
state?
And that's a grant amount. And
Right.
the other thing we learned is that there's still grant money out there. And perhaps we could, with the assistance of Mark, he has nothing else to do. Apply
I heard
for.
that.
the funds that are out there for helping the legal with drafting, perhaps the design. I mean, there are other pots out there.
Having somebody other than us come up with estimates of the effect on, the town services
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Would be
is so
beneficial.
important.
would be enormously important
Yes.
for the town
Vote.
vote.
Yeah.
Well, it provides credibility and.
Okay, so we need to find another grant because
We do.
Sarah's not gonna take on any more.
We're not looking at a small tax increase this next year.
Oh,
We are looking at a big penalty if this thing doesn't pass.
Right, I know. Are we gonna look at this table? Because
Yeah,
it comes in with more units than what we need, and I'm wondering how we're gonna down adjust it before Monday.
And I also want to understand what the assumption, because she says on the first page about current zoning, please note, general zoning district was not modeled with its current restriction of 4 dwelling units.
So what was it modeled with?
I don't even know what that sentence means.
Yeah,
Right,
so
I know, I was very confused because
before,
it's,
let's back up for a second,
Okay.
because I want to go back to the planning board
Okay.
okay,
presentation.
yeah,
So after we do this our little shtick, I don't know what to call it, this
our
descriptive.
intro.
Intro, charrette. We'll then introduce Emily, and she's going to talk about the law and how it works and how the model works. And how these districts are, why they were useful locations given our guidelines. And then I think that's about it for the planning board meeting at that point, from our point of view. The planning board's got other things to do.
But don't we have to explain?
Are we gonna
The
explain
district-
this?
So, yeah,
And the
so
numbers?
we'll explain, yeah, so she'll explain this, she's gonna have maps of the districts
And
and stuff.
these numbers are too high.
So that's what I want to talk about. I just wanted to get there. So, I think the only number that's really too high is that they modeled both sites of the storage facility.
Yep. We don't need them.
And we don't, and it's a bad look, I understand, to have 199 units there.
What were the sizes of the two parcels?
One was 6 acres and the other was 4. I think.
3, I think.
You know, one is
Because we only need
6.9 of
3.16 based on all these other numbers.
But we have to have at least 5.
Right,
So-
Yeah, it's
At least.
the 6 acre piece. so
but we can limit the number, well,
We can fiddle around with lot coverages and things, I guess, to get it down a little bit. But it's still gonna be 100 units, no matter what we do.
well,
Well, we
the
get
first 6 come in at, oh no, they're
there,
284
if you
addition.
go all the way over to storage, it comes in, a number of potential units allowed is 452. So that's
What?
103
No,
units.
651.
No, if
Before
you
you
add
get to the
across
last
number
one.
of potential
Okay.
units, right,
Right,
is 452. So
Right.
what we need to comply is 103.
Yeah.
If you're,
Right.
just taking.
Wait, I'm lost. I'm sorry.
Okay, there's a.
I just printed this out.
the third
before.
line on the table she's
Right
looking at.
So
down.
you're totaling up all those numbers?
I'm
Yes.
totaling up 69, 106, 94.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So just so you know that I think what they're doing there is not the current zoning, it's the proposed MBTA zoning.
It's the capacity number.
Yeah, it's the capacity.
Whatever
It is the
assumptions-
Capacity number, but we don't know what.
We
the
don't know what
assumption
assumptions
is.
are being used.
So it shouldn't say by right under current zoning.
No, it should not.
No,
Right,
What
Right,
she means is that she's using the same setbacks and the same coverage,
Coverage.
40-70%.
Yes,
but what
And
we
she has not
and the
used,
same height.
and she has not used the base
Limit.
unit, additional unit zoning, which can be used to fine tune these numbers. And she said that. So these numbers can be tuned within and around these numbers.
and
Now,
for
I have a
example, under
question for
current
you,
zoning, there are
Richard.
no units allowed at the storage facility, so that should be 0. That's why I realized that what was happening here.
Hmm,
Well,
yes.
I think that this table needs to be adjusted with different estimated units, so it comes to the 555 capacity, and then can do the difference between existing and the capacity. I think
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah,
And I think that we have to kind of say, okay, are we gonna allow 100 units in the
Right.
LCD? I mean, I think we need to
Right.
just adjust this
yes,
table.
yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
I have a question about how the model works. Because what I noticed from your runs early on, Richard, is that when you set a limit of 3 units or 4 units, when you set a cap, it just blew the whole thing out of the water. We were in trouble. But if there, for example, I wonder if what she did was to take, let's say, a 10,000 square foot lot and say, okay, 6,000 is the minimum, and you can have a 3 unit building there. And then you add 2,000 and 2,000, and each 2,000 means you add 2 more units.
Well, I asked her that question and she said she didn't use that.
Ah.
The parameters in the model are a base lot size, which is the space, there's a minimum lot size, then there's a base lot size, which is the first unit. And then there's another lot size for successive units. So you can,
Right.
for example, take a 2,500 for the first unit and then say it's going to be 2,000 square feet for every additional unit. And that applies to all the parcels. You can't get away with putting a parcel limit on any of these districts because
Right.
you,
It just-
you lose the advantage of the larger developments and your averages get thrown out the window. So you have to tune it with that.
So
She
can-
said at the last meeting that she did not do anything other than use the coverage and setback requirements. I
Help
assume
me
that's-
understand how what you just said would work with a 10,000 square foot lot.
Well, with a 10,000
If a
square foot lot, if you
6,000
said
square
20,
foot is the base.
if you said 2,500 for the first unit and 2,000 for the successive units, you would get 4 units. You get 3 units. You wouldn't get 4. Because you'd get 3 times 2,000 is 6,000, then 8,500, and you wouldn't be able to put in the 4th unit because you said, on the other hand, if you change that to be 2,000 for the base and 2,000 for
Then you get
additional, you get
5
a 5
units.
unit.
Right,
And
okay.
you can see that change. That tuning is going to be very important to the final decisions
Oh my
because
gosh.
it flips the small parcels and the big parcels and evens them out or not.
Mhm.
Based on that, I think we need to encourage the planning board to let us go forward. I don't. This
To continue the tuning.
continue the tuning.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is hard work. Not that the planning board doesn't work hard, it's
So,
that the planning board has so much work to do.
Yeah.
That expecting them to pick up this level of knowledge and do the tuning.
so is,
Too
is the
much.
expectation that we present this table and then we say, but the intention is to fine tune it, to reduce the total number of capacity units to get to the 555?
We could certainly say that, yes. And maybe that's the strategy, although I'd rather have her correct the,
Definitely, it needs
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
let's-
corrected
let's have
because
it
it's
right.
confusing.
you know,
She definitely has to be corrected, but I would urge us to encourage them to allow us to fine tune it, because otherwise we're going to be getting whatever Innocent Associates decides to do on their last round. And,
Yep,
you know, despite all best efforts, that may not be exactly what we had.
we want.
We don't want a recommendation presented to the planning board that we haven't seen
Right.
as our recommendation.
no, that's right.
And this is all we've seen, so it seems like you have to present this and then say,
Well, it's first pass.
yeah,
I
the
mean,
intention is
After months of,
to reduce
Fiddling.
the total unit.
That's a good point. Even if this winds up being the exact geography, the distribution of units is very much a draft.
Right.
Yeah,
yes,
And it
that's a
may-
great way to put it.
and more
It's a great way
importantly, it may lead us to tinker the boundaries of the district.
There's just a bit,
Right.
yep, yep.
Right. You could decrease, if you gotta have 5 acres out of town, you can decrease the ones in town a tiny bit.
That's a very good point.
Right. And we
When
have-
if we get forced into a decision with LCD, we would definitely want to make some changes elsewhere. I think.
Yep, yep.
Could she just make a change so that right in the storage properties column, rather than using the 2 parcels,
Just use the 6.
just use the 6.8 or
Yeah.
whatever?
Yeah, that we can do.
And I would be happy making that change and having it presented without my seeing it again.
Well, it's gonna be better no matter what you do.
And I mean, some of the language things we spoke about.
Get current zoning
um,
out of there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because it's not.
Can we have,
Although I'd like to see a row that shows what it would be in the current zoning.
Oh, it'll-
I think that's an interesting number also.
It's a low number.
I don't think. it
well, isn't
necessarily-
that, oh no, existing unit, so you would like to see potential units under current zoning. Not allowed by right,
No,
right?
oh,
I
she
mean,
did that calculation.
Yeah, it wasn't.
So you'd like another row,
She
like
did that
another one.
calculation a while. I don't know if she included all these parcels, but she did the first four.
well,
A
yeah,
number
yeah.
of weeks
So
ago.
I'll get in touch with her and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So Ann, what you're wanting the storage property to be is just the 6.8 acre one.
I agree with that.
I.
By the
Slightly,
way, where it says minimum lot size and then go over to the storage properties, minimum lot size is 217,000 square feet. I mean,
Yeah.
it is.
No, that's crazy.
That's the
It's
point.
5
That's
acres.
2 lots in there.
It's, the minimum lot size is, and the LCD is 5 acres. So.
Right.
So that's what should be there.
Yeah.
Is 2,000,
yeah.
what is that, is that 5 acres?
Well, that's what it
Oh,
says.
okay,
Yeah.
Close to it.
okay.
So is this accurate that we actually, under the current zoning, these all add up to 452 units?
No, that's
No.
under the capacity.
That's under the
No.
capacity.
How
The
many-
existing units are right here on this
We-
line. Number of existing units are here. 168 is.
Maybe you should ask her to do a total.
Yeah, we definitely need
Total
totals.
column.
We need totals.
Okay.
It's probably not important, but I think part of Valentine to Summer is not in fact in G.
It's
That's
not
correct.
what?
Part of
That's
it's
correct.
the same, that's right.
And
Oh, I
part of,
thought it
and
was
part of summer
A.
is not a G.
I think it's A.
Okay.
Tappan Street
Hey,
is
I-
all A.
We learned that in our zoning
Yes.
101.
So it probably doesn't make any difference.
It
But when
does.
she,
Yes, it does, because the rules are different. Yeah, that's a good catch.
we can change the overlay can change the rules,
Yes.
but
Yes. But it's good to know what the underlying.
I
rules
don't
are.
understand why it makes any difference.
well, she says here Valentine to Summer is underlying zoning district G.
Oh, I see.
And it's a
Yeah,
mixture
yeah.
of G and A.
A.
And what's C Street?
And
C Street.
C Street is A.
The side between Summer and
Yeah.
Tappan?
I believe so.
Yeah, that pokes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's
And-
important to be accurate.
Yes.
Because every time we're not accurate, we get
We get
accused of
some-
not knowing what we're talking about.
So it's summer, but summer
being
too. is
floppy.
in low G, is it?
No, it isn't. It goes out, it's
It
past.
turns into C or something like the gas
Can,
station.
can Summer 2 have better words with it
Yeah, we can.
and say Brook Street to
Vine to Brook.
whatever that gas station
Vine to
is?
Lincoln.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
It
is
goes
Lincoln.
even beyond Lincoln. Other side of Lincoln.
No, it.
yeah,
It's a Lincoln
well,
address.
it sort of does.
Oh, no, it's the summer address. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the last
Close
house.
enough.
yeah.
No, it's the gas station.
Brook Street to Lincoln is just kind of makes it.
Mhm.
Summer 2 means
Brook
nothing.
to Lincoln, is that what we should call it?
It's Vine to Lincoln.
Is it?
What?
I think it's,
What do you mean Vine?
I think it's Brook.
No,
No.
No.
No, wait,
Wait a
oh,
minute.
God. It's
is it Allen? No.
It's
Allen, I'm sorry. It's
Yes.
Allen.
Allen.
Alan.
Allen.
It's Allen, and in the case of Allen, it's just
That's
the
all right, yeah.
66 Summer,
But you
Allen,
got the little,
the old cricket building.
Right, the ancient, yes, exactly.
You know, I think it's G district on the north side of Summer
it
Street.
is.
And it's, but we have a few properties on the other side of the street.
Is it G all the way?
So
up
it's
to
G
Lincoln?
and A again.
Past, all the way out, yeah, all the way out to Pleasant.
gotta look at our maps.
Oh, wait,
Or Lincoln, all the way up to Lincoln, right. All the way up to Lincoln.
I got the map right here.
map right here.
So small, I can't read it.
Okay, so what are we gonna call this? Allen to Lincoln?
No, it is Allen to Brook.
No, it isn't.
No, it goes all the way.
Oh, no,
to
it's Allen to
Lincoln.
Lincoln. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It is
yeah.
Allen.
It's
Allen
Summer
to Lincoln.
Street, Allen to Lincoln is what I
And the
said.
gas station is outside the G district.
Remember walking around in the pouring rain?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Rigid cold.
yeah.
The gas station is not in G district.
no, it's an A.
No.
The gas station is an A?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It starts on
It-
the
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 gas
east
station
side of
predates
Lincoln.
zoning.
So it's again G and A.
G and A.
Yeah.
Remember,
to mention
most
the-
of what's in town does not comply with zoning.
Not to mention the part of Summer Street that we're on the other side of it, that's all, also.
That's A.
And then we go out of the district on Pine. We're not in G on
Wait a
Pine.
minute.
Right.
Isn't it also D? D1?
There's
D2?
No,
there's some D1 and some D2.
Yeah, yeah, there's some D1 in there.
I don't know how far down we're going.
I would just take that line out.
Good idea.
Which one?
What the
The
underlying
underlying-
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe that's-
I mean,
Yeah.
probably the main thing about all of this is that it's 40% coverage.
Yeah, agree. Let's take.
and the
that.
fact
And
that
70%.
this says D2, that's inaccurate.
Right,
D1.
right.
No, it is D2 overlay, but there's underlying zoning districts under the D2. The D2 is only the first 100 feet from the street.
I think that got changed.
No, it didn't.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter, we'll just take it out.
Okay, so yeah, just take out the line.
Yeah,
It's a
Okay.
good solution.
And we can leave the minimum lot size at 6,000 because that's what the overlay is going to be. And we don't have to put in that some of it's 6,000 and some of it's single acre, 1
Right,
acre, and
right.
some of it's.
right.
Right. No.
But you might
Yeah.
want to put in 40% coverage.
That's what this
Yeah,
says,
that is
40%.
There, that is
Says-
there.
This sheet says 40%.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
And that's
little,
the lot.
it's a teeny
by
line.
structure.
Very good,
Correct.
yes.
Yeah, she might want to say lot coverage by structure, just.
Is it by structure?
Yes,
Okay,
because they're not looking at total coverage.
right.
They're only doing the calcs for the structure.
yep.
And it doesn't matter to them whether the parking is permeable or impermeable, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Right?
Um,
And then,
I would, because I do think there are some choices about downtown versus the limited commercial district. So it would be extremely useful. We were talking about a total column. Where I'd put that total column would be between the Summer, Allen to Lincoln and storage properties.
two totals, a subtotal and then a total.
Yes, correct.
Oh, so we'll make it.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, because then you-
Downtown,
you can see what,
downtown total
Yeah.
and total.
you can
total.
see what
Yeah.
you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And if they see only 6 acres in the limited commercial, maybe they want more there.
Right.
And I don't know.
That's good.
Okay,
And this doesn't, this chart does not show. Oh, the density modeled under current zoning, is that the size? Is that the acreage? No.
Oh,
No acreage is shown here.
That's,
yes, the
minimum
acreage
lot
is the
size.
second
Which
line
one?
down, acres, 4 acres, 8.8.
Where?
It's right under proposed
It's
district.
just for-
Great.
I couldn't find.
Oh, I
either,
got it,
actually.
okay. at the top.
I basically went and looked and found the
Okay,
acreage
got it.
on something else,
So
but
we-
it's right there.
we decided we were going to change that text, density model under current zoning.
Yes.
Yeah, I
And
have,
what
a-
are we going to say? Density modeled under.
Density
MBTA.
model
Your
capacity,
overlay just-
yeah.
Yeah, MBTA zone.
MBTA capacity is what I'd say.
Well, it's MBTA density in this case, because that's the density.
Oh, well, but then the one above it, you need to say
Yeah,
MBTA
Yeah.
zoning capacity. Yeah. Because if we can't understand this, nobody else will understand it
Right.
either.
Are we going to need a meeting before the planning board meeting? There's no, we can't do it, it's too late.
well, I mean, we can meet Monday morning and we.
No,
can meet-
no, we can't
We
post it.
it.
We can't,
Too late, we-
Well, I mean, doesn't this, I've been away, so, but isn't this what you,
It's a pretty,
what we kind of thought we were gonna do?
Yeah, but we've
It's a
taken
pretty
out a
good
line
chart.
here, we put in 2 columns
Okay, all
there.
right, yeah.
We've reduced the number of acres in 1
Well,
column.
as a courtesy, I'll have Gail send out the revised things. that they need.
And,
Well, if
and
it's any-
as
if
far as the areas that we are suggesting, proposing rezoning, those are consistent with what you in these meetings told
We've
them.
got these maps.
Yes.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
took a little whip on our work.
really,
So,
they barely
nothing-
survived the walk, right?
My point is, she's not coming up with the proposal that we haven't seen. Is that
No,
right?
no,
can't- the
all
question
I'm worried about is the table.
Okay.
Yeah, and what it looks
and-
like.
What it looks like.
What it contains.
There is, if it gives you any comfort, there is a communications subcommittee meeting that's been announced with an agenda and all of that for Monday morning, correct?
Yeah.
Yes, so we
Well,
could
question,
look at
is-
it
is
for,
it- Did it get posted in time?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, so we can take a look at how it comes out, if you would trust us with that.
What time is that meeting?
10.
You might not have it at 10.
Well, we'll see. We can ask. You don't ask, you don't get.
The final thing.
We may not have the chart from Emily
Yeah,
revised.
I find it hard to believe we would.
That's
Well,
okay.
Well, I mean, it's
It's not
not
that
huge
bad.
changes, the totals, it's,
We're not gonna be giving it to
These
them till
things
tomorrow.
with us.
What?
We're
I
gonna
have a
presented
question for
those, 'cause, I
you.
mean,
Uh,
somebody's looking at Newport Park, somebody in the planning board may not know exactly what dimensions we're talking about, or what geographical area, so I think it's important.
These are what we need.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do
these are
need
the-
those.
Right, I think
We do need
that could be
those.
part and parcel. of
I agree.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Oh, it's a useless chart without. the
Yeah,
map
See
the
what-
individual maps, yep.
For each district.
Okay, Sandy, you have something else?
I have a question about, because looking at this chart, I thought, well, okay, in terms of acres, in terms of number of units, we're okay. What I don't understand in terms of how the model works is she's got that line of density modeled for MBTA zoning. And I don't know if overall in the total, grand total column, the density, we would achieve the density that's required.
Oh, I think she's made that check, but.
So you
Oh, I
need
don't
that-
know, but
you-
it's not
You
clear.
put that
from
in the
this.
totals
It'll
column.
be in the
Yeah,
total
totals column,
Yeah,
great,
it'll be
okay.
there.
The
Yeah.
total and subtotal, so we'll know
Yeah.
how much of the density
Yeah.
downtown
The
is
average
picking up.
density downtown.
Down,
Yeah,
yeah,
it won't be a total really, it will be the average density across all the parcels
Yeah.
downtown.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay, anything else?
Okay,
I mean,
One more question.
Yes.
How many acres in total do we have to provide?
37 point.
Okay.
37, and this is,
I just added up the acres here, including the 10.2, and it's 38.5.
right,
Um,
We're talking about reducing the size of the storage.
I don't know. Dan.
No.
I got 23.2
I got
for
30,
Pine Street,
I-
and
I
then,
just took the acres off the top here.
yep,
I came up with 33.84 in the downtown area.
Yep.
Which
Yes.
meant we only needed about 4 in the LCD.
right, I got those numbers also, Sarah.
So where are these numbers at variance with your numbers, is what I'm
I
asking.
don't know, this is when you add that across. You go, the Pine Street sub-districts, you get 23.2. And then these two together are 10.6,
I'm just, you know,
and then it's 33.8 for the downtown.
I took them off of.
Well,
Alright.
these
Yeah.
are the numbers that she took off their drawings.
I did the
And
acre.
Oh, yes, me too.
As we know,
My Polish calculator.
they minimized the acreage. We
Yeah.
could squeeze quite likely another acre out of here if we went to midpoint streets. They don't like that idea.
Well, reduces our density.
It does, puts a little pressure on the density.
But not so much. I mean, it's not that much, but it gets a little more.
Well, you can
What do you
tune the
think-
LCD to do whatever.
Yeah,
you
but you
What do you
still
think
need
it
5
would add,
acres in the
Richard?
LCD, so why try to get another acre out of downtown?
It would just depend on whether we were, I'm just pointing out that if we were just a tiny bit shy in the LCD with one of those,
Right.
one of those selections, we could make up for it. I don't know if that's the
Pretty
case.
easily.
Because wasn't, what are the two sizes of the lots there?
6 and.
6.8 and 2.6.
So did we decide 6.8 was enough?
Yeah,
6.8
So she's
is
gonna
enough.
change that to 6.8?
It's slightly more than enough.
6.8 and
Okay, good.
2.4 are the two.
Right,
numbers.
that makes sense.
Wow, I'd like to move we adjourn.
Well, we
Oh,
have,
no, we're not done with the agenda, Gar.
Of course you would.
You're not done. You're not on vacation still. Enough.
well, I would like to open this up for public comments, if there are any.
Are we gonna approve minutes or?
Yeah, then we'll
see.
approve.
Okay.
it.
Leave that up to 33.8.
Do I have a motion to approve the 2 sets of minutes everybody got?
I read them.
Your calculator just hadn't.
Okay, moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved, Gail.
I tried doing this.
Sue?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
So we tentatively will
Hotel.